What's up, everybody? Welcome back. It is the Occupy Fantasy Football Podcast Week 7 edition. The season is rolling along. I'm Brian Jester, co-founder and co-host here at Occupy Fantasy, joined as always by our NFL Daily Plug writer, Chris Rooney. What's happening, Chris? Happy Wednesday, sir.
Brian, the members, the listeners, the Periscope viewers, the Twitch viewers, they doubted me.
They
And I
did.
told them that it was going to be Houston and Tennessee on Sunday. And Houston and Tennessee was the game stack that took down that big contest on FanDuel. Unfortunately, it was not you who took down that contest, but we're still going to take that victory lap. Just never doubt what we have to bring for you here on the Occupy Fantasy podcast. Looking forward to talking about week 7 with you.
I know. I need to start listening to our own advice. I actually didn't stack that game for whatever reason, and my ROI suffered as a result. But at this point, we have no point or no reason to doubt you with your game stack choices. So be sure to stay tuned in this episode for the very end, where Chris gives his favorite game stacks of the week. What we normally do here is we talk about some injuries from the week before, talk about some backfield situations, and try to pin down some running back usage. We'll talk about the slate from a high level, the upcoming Sunday main slate from the betting market point of view. And then we'll talk about, of course, our underperforming wide receivers, some tight end usage, and then we'll cap it off with Chris's favorite game stacks of the week. Before we get into it, though, got to ask you to go ahead and click that subscribe button, whether you're watching the video version or YouTube, or you're listening to this in your favorite podcast app. Just go ahead and click subscribe. That way you get all these videos or podcast episodes directly to your feed when they are released. So, Chris, let's talk about some injuries last week, and honestly, not that many, which we're thankful for. If you are listening to this podcast before Thursday night, two major injuries. Zach Ertz is out. Miles Sanders is out. Chris, what's the word on those guys? And if somehow people are listening to this before Thursday, how can we take advantage on the showdown slate?
I mean, I know we don't like to get too caught up in historical matchup stuff because that can be misleading, but Boston Scott has absolutely thrashed the Giants with the Eagles when he's gotten a lot of workloads. So I do think that's probably the best place to go as far as all these injuries are concerned on the Philadelphia side.
Yeah, definitely. So again, we'll have the daily plug out on Thursday, but just a quick preview. Boston
Yeah.
Scott's going to have a lot of good words in
Yes.
there. All right, let's talk about the main slate now. Raheem Mostert, unfortunately, in high ankle sprain, he was sidelined for the second half of that game against the Rams. Jerick McKinnon didn't get as much work as we thought. Jeff Wilson was inactive because of a calf injury. Jermichael Hasty had 9 second half touches, and Tevin Coleman's still a couple of weeks away. Chris, I read something about Shanahan saying that they're worried about McKinnon's efficiency after his 92% snap count game a couple of weeks ago. I don't know. I mean, Shanahan's hard to trust with his words, but this is an interesting backfield situation to say the least.
Yeah, I don't know if I buy that at all, man. That sounds like crap to me. I mean, the other thing that came out was Shanahan talked about working Hasty into that game against the Rams because they were worried about giving McKinnon a lot of work, and McKinnon only played like 30% of the snaps. So I'm not sure what he was talking about there. Maybe there's more than meets the eye that you and I can tell. Maybe McKinnon actually is dealing with some residual effect from those knee injuries, and that's why they're doing this. But I think Wilson was a calf injury late in the week last week. That's why he wasn't active. That's still a problem here in week 7. So this is an interesting backfield to try to figure out for this game here because they are in a interesting spot on the road against the Patriots. Both Hasty and McKinnon are affordable in DFS this week, but we'll have to see what we learn by Friday because I don't know if we have a good read on this situation yet.
Yeah, a little too early in the week, and who knows? We may not know at all, and we may have to make some guesswork on Sunday. Let's talk about the Tennessee Titans really quickly. Jonnu Smith hurt his ankle. He left the game, and then as a result, Anthony Ferkser, who actually I think is a pretty good player, he balled out, 8 catches, 100 plus yards, and this will be an injury to monitor throughout the week.
Yeah, Ferkser, just to maybe get ahead of ourselves a little bit, we'll talk about him a lot more when we talk about tight ends for this slate, but definitely looking like a player that we want exposure to, especially if Jonnu Smith is inactive here.
Absolutely, and then a couple AFC East notes. Sam Darnold might be back this week, limited in practice. I don't know if it matters with that horrific offense. And then John Brown of the Bills did play last week. Didn't practice on Wednesday today as we're recording this, so his status is up in there. But two injuries certainly to monitor.
Yeah, with Buffalo being one of the highest implied team total offenses this week, Brian, I think Darnold potentially returning for the Jets might just be something that we're interested in, is in terms of that game being a little more productive on both sides. So that's really the only reason it's kind of worth mentioning.
Yeah, and if Brown somehow does miss this game, we'll look to Gabe Davis as a value play
Yep.
as he continues to play a ton of snaps. And if Brown misses, he'll be thrust into a top three receiver role for that pass heavy offense. All right, let's talk about some backfield situations as we try to narrow down some of the noise and filter through some of the news from some of these teams' backfields. So let's talk about Kansas City really quickly. CEH had a fantastic game against Buffalo on Monday night, rushed for about 7,000 yards. Now they get Le'Veon Bell back potentially, Chris, this week.
Yeah, so here on Wednesday, I guess it's being reported that Andy Reid has said that he's not sure if Le'Veon Bell will even be active here in Week 7. Now, it all depends on whether or not Bell is able to sort of pick up the offense and be ready to go. I don't know if this is just coach speak, Brian. I'm kind of leaning towards that. I feel like Bell will be ready to go for them. But if he's not active, I mean, we really want to look at CEH pretty closely. Kansas City, huge favorites against the Broncos this week. And how unlucky is this dude, man? I mean, 2 weeks in a row where he has some pretty nice plays inside the 10, for a touchdown, called back on penalty. So don't buy into any narratives out there that this kid can't punch the ball in. He certainly can. He's getting bad luck right now. So
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't surprise anyone, especially if Bell's inactive, if all of a sudden all of his touchdown variants hit at once and he goes
yeah.
for 3, 4 touchdowns in a single game. So
Mhm.
either way, yeah, let's closely monitor Le'Veon's potential involvement in the game on Sunday. Now, the Detroit Lions, a lot of people, in fact, someone is $1 million richer as a result of it on DraftKings. DeAndre Swift, his first game with 10 plus carries, and he went off 100 plus yards, 2 touchdowns. I don't know if this is something we can currently buy into, though, especially with Adrian Peterson still there. I got to think loser list Matt Patricia still gives him the ball a ton.
I mean, that's been our concern all year that we've talked about, at least offline. Not sure if we've talked about it on the show yet. Just do not trust this Detroit coaching staff to actually use their best players effectively. But this was the closest it has been all year. I mean, Swift, obviously, with, as you mentioned, all those carries, especially good work in the red zone. Fairly even snap distribution between him and Peterson here. So maybe they are trusting Swift a bit more. One thing that we do know for sure is Kerryon Johnson is just completely useless. So that sucks.
I know, yeah. Well, I think we both like on Johnson,
Yeah.
and ideally we'd love DeAndre Swift just to get 80% of the snaps here, but it doesn't look like it's going to be a thing anytime soon, barring an injury to one of his backfield mates. Let's talk about Buffalo. Now, this can be an interesting backfield to digest, just because Zach Moss was coming off of injury, and I was wondering when he was ever going to come back because it seemed like he was
Yeah.
practicing in full for like 2 straight weeks. Finally makes his return against the Chiefs, but didn't play nearly as much as he did in the Week 1 opener.
No, and I don't know if this was purely just trying to ease him back in or if game script led to more Singletary being on the field, because I think he's proven to be a pretty effective weapon for them when they're in hurry up, when they're looking, to make plays on passing downs. So part of that was at play, obviously, with Buffalo trailing. I do think Moss is going to play more as he ramps back up to a normal workload, but we'll see what the reports are this week, just because with Buffalo being such a huge favorite against the Jets this week, this is obviously a situation we want to be super. I think we want to be super invested in this situation this week, but we'll see how it pans out.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in the next sections. We hit on the highest favorites and the largest favorites and the biggest totals of the week. Before we get there, a couple more backfields to talk about. The Patriots, after Damien Harris saw 17 touches in his season debut, just 7 touches last week as the Patriots couldn't get much offense going against the Broncos. New England trailed most of the game. As a result, we saw James White get most of the work. So I'm not sure how to look at this moving forward.
Yeah, this is, to me, it just seems like typical New England backfield usage when they need to kind of play fast pass. It's James White season for the Patriots. So kind of disappointing. Harris is not more dynamically involved in the offense. So we'll just have to keep an eye on that. I know you and I, neither of us really love playing James White in DFS, but that's just, I guess, something to be aware of if we think New England is going to be trailing in games. White is, especially on a PPR site like DraftKings, an interesting option.
Yeah, and we'll have to again monitor this moving forward and see how the Patriots offense looks and what the implied totals tell us before the games begin. All right, one final backfield, the Chargers. We didn't talk about them last week because they were on a bye, but pretty crazy usage for Justin Jackson and Joshua Kelly in the first game after Austin Eckler's injury. I think it surprised a lot of people.
Yeah, and does this maybe have something to do with Kelly's fumble issues that he's been having this year? I mean, Jackson certainly is the veteran. He's been there for a while and probably, quote unquote, knows the offense. We love making fun of that saying this year. I don't know, man. I mean, I think Kelly will end up playing some more as the weeks march on here. They're going to be without Eckler for a stretch. So, we'll see what happens. But there's no ability for us to be confident that Kelly's going to be anything more than a GPP flyer against the Jaguars this week.
So what do we think about Jackson then as we transition to our week 7 betting market analysis? We like to look at games from a top level, figure out which teams are in good spots, and then drill down into player specifics after that. The Chargers are 7.5 point favorites against the Jags this week. That's one of the bigger favorites. We also have the Saints as 7.5 point favorites over the Panthers. The Chiefs 10 point favorites over the Broncos, and then the Bills only, I'll say only, 13.5 point favorites over the Jets. Generally, these big favorite teams are where we look to target running backs. So Justin Jackson would certainly fit the mold here if we think he continues that usage.
Yeah, the interesting thing is I think the contest providers, at least on the DraftKings side, are just as uncertain about this as we are. Jackson's actually cheaper than Kelly on DraftKings this week,
Interesting.
just 4,900. So um, it's interesting, man. I mean, the Jaguars are really bad, particularly defending the run. Uh, Advanced statistics from Football Outsiders has them in the bottom half of the league here, bottom third actually, both in just the traditional running game and defending running backs in the passing game as well. So if we see more of what we saw last time out from these Chargers, Jackson's probably a really strong play on this slate. I really think that you're going to see everybody have exposure to Alvin Kamara here. Saints 7.5 point favorites against the Panthers. I think this is going to be a pretty high scoring game in general. And even with Michael Thomas probably almost certainly coming back, I don't think Kamara is going to see that much of a dip in opportunity here. So I think those are probably two of the spots I'm most interested in from my perspective.
Yeah, and just real quick, let's talk about Buffalo. Singletary and Moss, we hit on it just a couple seconds ago, but Singletary appropriately priced, probably a really good spot for him. I guess really the question is, how much work does Moss take in a game they should control, and does Buffalo just continue to pass the entire time, limiting the effectiveness of both? I think it's a question we'll have to effectively answer if we want to get this slate right.
Yeah. Does if Buffalo's running away with this thing, does it turn into a Moss game? I mean, we talked about this in our abbreviated daily plug for the 2 game slate this past Monday. Moss has actually seen more work in the red zone. So something certainly for us to keep an eye on.
All right, let's talk about some of the highest total games as the trend continues of teams scoring a ton of points this year. We see a lot of high total games. Detroit and Atlanta, 56.5 point total this week. Seattle and Arizona, also a 56.5 point total. Green Bay and Houston, 56 points. I mean, just record number of games in 55 points or higher. And then Pittsburgh, Tennessee, Carolina, New Orleans, both at 51 points roughly. And then AFC North battle between the Browns and the Bengals, 50-point total. So lots of games with high expected point totals that we can choose from.
Yeah, Mr. Unlimited, Russell Wilson and Kyler Murray. I think that's the one that jumps out to me anyway. 56.5 points and 2 MVP candidates, I would say, this year in the NFL. That's my favorite one there. Talk about that later, hint, hint. But with as far as team totals on their own go, we have the Packers leading the way right now on the main slate. Buffalo, New Orleans, Seattle, all kind of right there at 29 points. And Atlanta, actually, in their game that they have coming up here against the Lions. They are the slight favorite there, high total. These are kind of 2 NFL teams I don't think anybody's super excited about right now, Brian, but that game does have a lot of potential for DFS here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of people were on Detroit and Jacksonville last week. Jacksonville didn't cooperate. Shouldn't be the case this week with Atlanta. With Julio Jones back, we see a big increase in Matt Ryan's efficiency and points per play when Jones is on the field. He looks like he's back healthy again. So it should be a shootout, and I think the total is probably in the right spot. All right, let's go to our underperforming wide receivers, the section we always love to talk about. Since week 4, we've had this list. Basically looks at receivers who have gotten a lot of opportunity in the past 3 weeks, haven't converted as much as they should have, whether it's in the touchdown department or in the yardage department for a variety of reasons. And as a result, these players are generally in good spots and due to blow up, whether it's this week or in the coming weeks. And we like to get these guys into our high risk lineups or low risk lineups if they're priced appropriately. Chris, not many guys this week. We had about 1,000 people on this list last week. Just 5 names on the list. And I know we'll have some PTSD with AJ Green being one of the top underperforming receivers this week. Marquez Valdez Scantling, Terry McLaurin, Michael Gallup, and Demir Bird round out the list. So, what are your initial thoughts when you see a list this short and these players on the list?
Well, the player that jumps out to me the most, Brian, honestly, is the F1 there, Terry McLaurin with Washington Football Team, which apparently is a name that they're going to be keeping for more than one season. Not to get too carried away and off the subject here, but he has been absolutely dominating the opportunity for Washington, especially over the last 3 weeks. Apparently, Logan Thomas, bane of my existence, flashed on the injury report today with some kind of condition with his neck. So that's never good in football. Terry with 58% share of the air yards over the last 3 weeks.
Wow.
It's just like now he's playing Dallas. We know how bad Dallas's defense is. We probably want to do the best we can to get as much Terry McLaurin as possible into our lineups this week. That's a pretty strong endorsement, but that's how strong I feel about him this week.
Yeah, as long as Kyle Allen can get it anywhere remotely near his zip code, he should be in line for a massive game. As we've seen time and time again, Dallas defenders just missing assignments and leaving players running wide open down the field. Thinking of Christian Kirk on Monday night, wide open for an
Yeah.
80-yard touchdown. So,
And I do really like Demir Bird here. I think he's too cheap in DFS this week for New England. Actually, Cam Newton kind of missed him up the seam there for a touchdown near the end of that game against the Broncos. So he's clearly been the wide receiver one for the Patriots, which definitely sounds strange when you kind of think of the fact that they have Julian Edelman. We all know what he's done for years, and first round pick there, N'Keal Harry, that they seemingly can't get going. So, but Demir Bird is the guy there, leading them in air yards over the last few weeks, over 50% share for New England. So not somebody that you think of as an alpha dog wide receiver in the NFL, but that's what he is for the Patriots right now.
no, absolutely. Running tons of routes, getting majority of the air yards for that offense. And at least the nice thing we can look at this small list of underperforming receivers. We have Demir Bird, who's cheap, which is always great. We're always looking for cheap options, especially on DraftKings. Gallup and McLaurin play against each other, so we get the correlation there. And then AJ Green and MVS are both in games with totals above 50 points. So it, while it's a small list, it's a quality list of guys we can target for our high risk lineups. All right.
I was just going to say, Brian, there before we move on, that because they're so cheap, they'll fit nicely into some of our favorite game stacks this week.
Yeah, exactly. We're always looking, especially on DraftKings, where a lot of game stacks are pretty expensive. A lot of the running backs are expensive. We're always looking for cheapish wide receivers to fit in, and if they're underperforming, it's even better. So I was just so excited to start talking about some of these tight ends, Chris. I mean, we get Alberto and Anthony Ferkser. I mean, how can we not be excited to talk about them?
Yeah, exactly. Everybody's favorite tight ends that they think of whenever they think of playing NFL DFS, right? Um, let's start with Alberto. I mean, targeted on 40% of his routes against the Patriots. Actually had a touchdown catch. Honestly, like he literally hauled it in against the Patriots. The defender just knocked it out of his hands on the sideline there. So if Fant misses again here, I think he's someone we're going to look at. He's min price on DraftKings, just 4,800 on FanDuel, so that'll be an intriguing spot to look at here. We already talked about Ferkser, had 9 targets in that game against the Texans. Definitely somebody to watch, especially if Johnny was out. My favorite tight end this week, and we did talk about him a little bit last week, Austin Hooper. I know that was a bad game for the Browns against the Steelers, like really bad, but Hooper still saw 5 targets. He caught all of them, 52 yards. Targeted on an above average amount of the routes that he runs by Browns quarterbacks in that game. He's just 4,000 on DraftKings this week. High total game favorite against the Bengals. That might be the play that we need to get up to some of these better running backs, better wide receivers, better quarterbacks that we want to play this week. We have Kittle and we have Travis Kelce. I mean, they were on the main slate. What do you think about that there, Brian? Where do you think most people are going to go? Should we avoid either of them potentially based on anything that you're looking at? I'm still kind of working through this personally.
Yeah, it's definitely tough. And I think if John Smith is out, almost everyone's going to go look to Ferkser, especially after his game last week. And then, a lot of people aren't really paying up for the tight end, especially when there's multiple on the slate. The ownership gets spread out a bit. Kelsey's the easier play of the two, obviously, especially as a big favorite. And now Kittle facing New England's defense. The big question is, how does Belichick defend him? If you listen to Belichick talk about Kittle, he talked for about 40 minutes about how great of a player Kittle is, which just means he's probably going to have some sort of plan in place. We saw how he dealt with Darren Waller a couple of weeks ago. So just knowing that, and that Kittle will likely have some sort of defensive plan against him, where I think Kelsey will be able to continue to use his regular offensive involvement. I lean Kelsey if choosing between the two, but I think we'll end up with some values here that we can play instead.
I think I agree with you. I mean, Belichick loves taking away the best weapon for teams and trying to make them beat you a different way. Plus, he knows a thing or two about Jimmy Garoppolo, so that'll probably play into the game plan there. Not to get too deep into San Francisco, New England right now. Some other tight ends, Brian, that I think are interesting this week. Don't want to spend too much time on them, but Eric Ebron hasn't done much the last couple weeks. Tennessee's 30th in the league defending tight ends in the passing game, so he'll be someone that we might want to look at in high risk. Hunter Henry, haven't talked about him really at all this year, but he's been pretty consistent, and his price is still pretty affordable. He's in that game against the Jaguars. He could end up having a big day for the Chargers.
Yeah, lots of options this week. Normally we're just scraping the bottom of the barrel for tight ends, but a decent amount of options at all price points this week, which is certainly helpful when we're building tournament lineups. All right, speaking of tournament lineups, let's finish the episode with Chris's favorite game stacks, trying to go 7 for 7 in calling the winning millionaire maker stacks. Incredible call last week with Tennessee and Houston. Gotta love your conviction on the Sunday morning Periscope, Chris. The people want it. Let us know who you're looking at this week.
Feeling a little bit like Miami Heat LeBron here. Not two, not three, not four. No. Everybody, I think, is going to be looking to the Packers and the Texans this week, Brian. We have what I think is the highest ceiling trio at quarterback, running back, wide receiver in the entire NFL, and Aaron Rodgers, Aaron Jones, and Devontae Adams if everything hits. I do like that even more than the Saints trio, although I do like them this week as well. And we have Deshaun Watson, who has 4 to 5x his salary the last couple weeks on DraftKings in his games, finally playing some softer defenses that he can carve up with his weapons as well. So that's probably going to be one. That's definitely, I think, one of the three we're going to write up this week. I'm really, really attracted to this Seattle and Arizona game. And I know that I don't have to sell you on
Amen.
stacking Kyler Murray, Brian. It's like your favorite thing to do. But low key, seriously, I think I said this earlier. I think Kyler is actually a legit MVP candidate this year. I don't think he's getting a lot of love for that just yet with mainstream NFL media, but had like over 25 DraftKings points roughly like every single week this year, doing a ton in the running game, getting a lot of design runs down by the goal line. I mean, this guy is insane right now, and you have an opportunity to double stack, Hopkins, Kirk with him. They're both kind of dominating the opportunity for the receivers. And then, I mean, the Incredible Hulk on the other side here, DK Metcalf. I mean, this game has so many stackable options. Tight end on Seattle with Olsen there, or Disley, who we've seen erupt from time to time. I mean, there's a lot of ways we can go with Seattle and Arizona. And so those two are my favorites. There's another two games I'm looking at. I'm not sure which ones I prefer here yet. It is Carolina and New Orleans, Kansas City and Denver. And so I know you're looking to me to tell you what I think is better here, but I'm actually interested in what you think about these two games, Brian.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things here. One, I people should listen to if you're listening to this, go check out our Tuesday night Twitch stream. The replay's up on YouTube. It's also up on twitch.tv/occupy fantasy, where we talk about a lot of game stacking, NFL DFS tournament theories. And there's a couple situations here that we talked about in the video in detail, but I do want to point out, Chris. And one is finding offenses with funneled volume. So Aaron Jones, Devontae Adams meets the criteria easily. Really easy teams to stack. And then also thinking about the Seattle and Arizona game, and I guess the Green Bay and Houston game too, where with teams scoring so many points this year, we got a question on Tuesday. Is it more viable this year to 3x2 stack, 4x1 stack, where you have three guys from one side, two from the other side in the same game, as opposed to our typical 3x1? And sure, especially if prices dictate that, or we don't have a ton of great plays that we like outside the game stat, we can certainly do that more. And thinking here, you go Kyler, DeAndre Hopkins, Christian Kirk, and running back with both Metcalf and Lockett certainly makes a ton of sense. And then if we go to Carolina, New Orleans, Kansas City, Denver, probably your more traditional stacks. But again, with Michael Thomas back, you could easily see two guys from Carolina, two guys from New Orleans in the winning lineup.
I do think, especially sticking with this Carolina New Orleans game, Brian, that we have two running backs in the same game that have, some of the highest weighted opportunity to touch the football in the NFL with Mike Davis for at least one more week here and Kamara. So Those guys probably going to be highly owned anyway. We do recommend trying to build lineups around highly owned running backs that project for a lot of touches. Pretty easy, therefore, to see this probably being our third game stack that we like this week.
Yeah, well, there you go. We just figured it out right on air
Yep.
what the
There you go.
third game stack is going to be. But don't forget about
Yep.
Kansas City and Denver either. With
No.
Mahomes, always in play for your game
Yep.
stack. So, all right, that'll do it for the Week 7 edition of the Occupy Fantasy Football Podcast. Be sure to subscribe, whether it's on YouTube or on your favorite podcast app, to get notified when all of our episodes are released. You can follow Chris on Twitter at CDR02989. You can follow me at BrianJesterFF. You can follow us on Twitter at Occupy Fantasy. So for Chris, I'm Brian. Appreciate everyone listening this week. Good luck, and we'll talk to you next week.